Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, so let's start with our visualization of the lineage masters and the meditation deities, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and ourselves surrounded by sentient beings. And when we think that, we're leading sentient beings and taking refuge and generating bodhicitta as we recite the verses, we shouldn't do that with a mind of, oh, I'm so superior, I'm leading them, to take refuge. But rather focus more on the plight of all of us sentient beings together as we muddle our way through samsara, overwhelmed by afflictions and karma, but not even recognizing that. Most of the people on the planet have no idea about what samsara is. They know that there's suffering in life, but it's not clear what the cause is, what the solution is. And so, because of that, wanting to be happy and not suffer continually are run by their afflictions and create more and more karma to sustain samsara. Despite human beings, anyway, having human intelligence that can be used to create good rather than harm. So let's cultivate our motivation. So one way the self-centered thought arises is when we don't get what we want, when not necessarily material things, but when things don't work out the way we would like. So we tend to get very upset because we had our plans and our way of doing things and how we would like something to unfold. And either other people are stepping in and changing that plan, or other external circumstances are changing, so we can't do what we planned. So we get upset and then ruminate, get more upset. Maybe we blast somebody. But it's a way of making ourselves miserable that we have polished to perfection. And in doing so, we make those around us miserable and create the kind of karma that acts as interferences to our Dharma practice in this life and in future lives. So it's good to see this pattern in ourselves and work at cutting it off. And cutting it off early, right when the mind starts to say, but it should be. As soon as you hear yourself say the word should, be aware that you're in trouble. Because should has very little connection with reality. So we can go on and on about how things should be, how people should behave. but the only thing should changes is our state of mind, making us more unhappy, more cynical. Aside from that, should doesn't do anything. And so here is where patience and fortitude come in, to really accept how things unfold. Accepting it doesn't mean we just sit back and maybe let things fall apart, but we can do something to improve the situation, but we do it without a mind of anger or arrogance. And so we can respect other sentient beings without respecting their afflictions. We respect them because they have the potential to become fully awakened, but we don't respect their afflictions, even if their afflictions bring them much worldly gain. Because the afflictions are the source of their pain. Okay, so with a mind that respects sentient beings, is aware of their potential, aware of how they, like us, shoot themselves in the foot, then let's develop the intention to become fully awakened, to reverse that process in ourselves and to help others reverse it as well. So really separating sentient beings out from their afflictions, separating them out from their actions while still holding them accountable in society and holding ourselves accountable. There are many fine lines here that it takes some time to really figure out and negotiate, because we are so much in the habit of somebody doing something motivated by afflictions that we instantly go to, that person is rotten to the core. Yeah. And as soon as we think they're rotten to the core, then, of course, our pride steps in. And we give up on certain sentient beings. And it's not that we should hound ourselves of, oh, I shouldn't give up on sentient beings. Should really doesn't do much, But think of how the Bodhisattvas and the Buddhas haven't given up on us, despite what we do. And then that gives us more inner strength to not give up on others. Yeah? Because we really see it's by the kindness of the holy beings that we're able to learn and make any progress whatsoever. You know? And you can see, sometimes it must be very tempting to go. Can you see Chenrezig with his 1,000 arms going, what are they doing? I've been teaching them this and that, and look what they're doing. Phooey, I'm going away, But Chenrezig doesn't do that. So if he doesn't do that for us, we shouldn't, let's not do it for others. Okay, so Shantideva is going to continue to smash our self-centeredness. So I hope your self-centeredness is all prepared and ready to tell Shantideva that he's wrong. Yeah? Yeah. But one thing that I've noticed, and it'll come up, well, it came up last week, of how it's easy to misinterpret some of Shantideva's passages. Okay, so if we go back to 126, which we did last week, if for my own sake I cause harm to others, I shall be tormented in hellish realms. That we can accept. If we harm others, the boomerang is coming back to us. But if for the sake of others I cause harm to myself, I shall acquire all that is magnificent. So those two lines is very easy to misinterpret. And it sounds like I should cause harm to myself. And this fits in very well with the, it's Judaic-Christian, but I think it's more Christian than the Judaic part of I'm a sinner, so I should self-flagellate, I'm a sinner, so I deserve to be harmed. I should harm myself. I mean, we have the old practices of the Catholic Church behind that. You beat yourself and so on. So, when Shantideva says that, he's not saying that we should punish ourselves and hate ourselves and feel guilty for everything that happened in the universe, even though we weren't behind it. Yeah, that's not what he's saying. What he's saying is, if in certain situations, if I have to give up what I want to be of great benefit to somebody else, then why not do it? Yeah, why not? Why sit there and just say, I'm more important, when we can look with our wisdom and see that if we just move a little bit, and do something, we can be of benefit. Yeah, so the verses are not telling ourselves to hate ourselves and beat ourselves up because we're sinners and make ourselves suffer in order to purify. Okay, those kind of ideas are not found in Buddhism. Yeah, and so if you grew up with those kind of ideas, this is the time to really bring them to the forefront and investigate them and prove to yourself how they are incorrect. Because those kinds of things don't do any good. Yeah, what good does harming yourself do to the world? Okay? And so it's not saying harm yourself. It's saying in situations where we can be of benefit, yeah, to sit there and be attached to our own stuff is, it's not really fair to our own potential as well as to the other person's happiness. Okay. And I say this because I know at the beginning when I was studying Shantideva, a long time ago, um, I would read things about, kind of sacrificing yourself for others. And then I thought, okay, I've got to do that. And so there were many situations where I didn't speak up, where looking back on it now, I think I should have. Yeah? But I didn't speak up because I was thinking, oh, let others have their way, let them do it the way they want. And many times that I should do that because I'm just grasping onto my way and it's not something that's important and I'm just being arrogant, in which case it's better just do it somebody else's way and learn from doing that. But what I'm talking about is situations, where somebody is doing something that's actually harmful and not speaking up about it because it's like, well, I cherish others more than myself, and if I speak up, I'm being self-centered, and that's not what Shantideva is talking about. Okay, and I think really looking at how His Holiness handles the whole situation with the Beijing government is a good example of this. He speaks up about when harmful things are done. Yeah, he doesn't just say, "Oh well, no problem. A little bit of genocide, no, not so bad. A little bit of environmental destruction, no, I'm not going to say anything." His Holiness doesn't whitewash things. Yeah, but he comments on them without being arrogant, without self-importance, and without blaming specific people. He talks about the behavior or the attitude. Okay, so this is a very good example, I think. And he encounters very difficult situations. I remember when some years ago, maybe this was the first time it happened in India, where one Tibetan man in Delhi self-immolated in protest about what was going on. Yeah. And everybody was shocked. And the Tibetan community in general said, what a hero. He gave his life for Tibet. Yeah. And they erected a statue on the back side of the big korwa around His Holiness's residence in Namgyal Monastery. Now, in His Holiness's position, what's he going to do? He can't say, what this person did was foolish. You shouldn't do that. That's foolish, and he wasted his life. I mean, because the whole rest of the community was looking at him as a hero. They were looking at him as the part that sacrificed his life for Tibet, and praising him in that regard. But His Holiness couldn't really praise that deed because, we have vows against praising death, don't we? Praising death is a parajika offense. It's serious. Yeah, if you do that as a monastic, you're out. So he's not going to praise death and encourage other Tibetans to follow this man's example. Of course, he was saddened by what happened, but so he had to navigate that of, respecting the community, thinking this guy was a hero, but also making it known that this is not the way to work on the situation. Yeah. And so at one point he said, we should live for Tibet rather than die for Tibet. You'll be more effective if you live for Tibet. So he didn't criticize that other man, but he laid out what he thought was the best action. Yeah, and that really struck me, that when there's dire situation, you have to live for it. Yeah, it doesn't mean that you, protect yourself above all others with a selfish mind that my life is more important than others. It doesn't mean that, but we shouldn't actively harm ourselves. It's better to work for the benefit long term of a cause. Okay? So 127 kind of follows up on that same kind of thing of benefiting others but harming self. Yeah. So 127 says, by holding myself in high esteem, I shall find myself in unpleasant realms, ugly and stupid. But should this attitude be shifted to others, I shall acquire honors in a joyful realm. Okay, so, it's true, by holding ourselves in high esteem, I shall find myself in unpleasant realms, ugly and stupid. Okay, holding yourself in high esteem. So let's say you have a position in society where, you are working for the media and you have the freedom to say different things. And you hold yourself in high esteem, and so you want the ratings, you want the success, you want the fame, and so you disparage other people, okay, motivated by one's own arrogance and one's own negative kind of ambition. And so it becomes quite obvious, when we know about karma, that if we act in that way, if you see yourself as above others and act in that way, karmically, what's going to happen in the future life? Your high status this life, next life, low status, and so you switch places, so to speak. And what's causing that switch is our own arrogant attitude. Okay, so he's warning us against that. But should this attitude, of holding in high esteem, be shifted to others, so if we hold others in high esteem, I shall acquire honors in a joyful realm. Now, does that mean that we hold all others in high esteem so that we support whatever they say and whatever they do, even if it's harmful? Is that what Shantideva is saying? If I shift this attitude and hold others in high esteem, somebody is doing things that's harmful, maybe you know somebody who has all the kind of warning signals for being a mass shooter. There are warning signals about it, but you hold them in high esteem, and you say, oh, if I hold them in high esteem, I shall acquire honors in a joyful realm. So, I know that this person has a whole trove of guns and they're leaking state secrets, and they make very violent comments online, but I respect them and hold them in high esteem. Is that what Shantideva is saying? No. Okay. What he's talking about is, in general, our attitude towards sentient beings, to hold them in high esteem in the sense that they want happiness, they don't want suffering, they mean well, even though they are often run or overwhelmed by afflictions. Okay, but we can still respect them as sentient beings, but it doesn't mean we respect all their actions and their attitudes and praise them for acting in harmful ways. It doesn't mean that. Okay? So these kinds of things, when you read it literally sometimes, it's very easy to misunderstand. And I once asked one Lama about that, about, why things in some of the text were so much on one extreme, yeah, like, like saying things like this that could be understood. Because in the West, when somebody says something, we take what they say literally, don't we? Somebody says, I want to do this, I'm going to do that, this is good, this is bad. We take it all very literally. Yeah, what this Lama explained to me is that in Tibetan society, that's not the case, okay? And he said, okay, when people's behavior is over here and their way of thinking is over here on the detrimental side, yeah, what they do is they give a statement that's over here, totally extreme on the positive side, yeah, and the aim is to bring that person to the middle, yeah, with a correct understanding, yeah. Whereas you do this same thing in Western culture, then we go from here to over there and say, oh, I should act completely, in this very other extreme way. It's kind of like you have cold water in your cup, and what you want is room temperature water. So you pour boiling water in it to get it in the middle, the temperature you want it. Yeah. What we do is you pour the boiling water in, and then you pour so much boiling water that when you start to drink it, you burn your mouth. Okay. So, to make an effort to really understand many of the statements. Yeah. And it's delicate because it's so easy to say, well, yeah, what they're saying is extreme, so actually what I'm doing is not so bad. I'm doing the best I can over on this extreme side, because I don't want to go over there to the extreme that, Shantideva's saying, so I'm okay over here on this extreme. It's hard to bring ourselves to the middle, and to really understand and think, what situations do I act this way in? What situations do I act that way in? And what kind of motivation do I need to have in all these situations? Okay, it's not easy. Mm-hmm. Or at least I should say, I didn't find it easy, and often still don't. It's like, Okay, 128. If I employ others for my own purposes, I myself shall experience servitude. But if I use myself for the sake of others, I shall experience only lordliness. So the same thing, yeah. The point is, yeah, if I employ others to serve me and I'm just bossing them around and, lording over them because I think I'm better than them and I have the power to boss them around or whatever it is, then I'm creating the cause to, instead of being born high status with that kind of power, to be born, in servitude. But if I am humble, and humble does not mean you have low self-esteem. Yeah, this is really important. Humble does not mean you have low self-esteem. It means that you have so much inner confidence that you don't need to let others know how wonderful you are. Yeah? We think, oh, somebody's very humble. Oh, they have poor self-esteem. And isn't it like this, you know? No. If you look at His Holiness, you know, again, very humble. In the year that he won the Nobel Peace Prize, he was also, at that time, he was in a conference, when a speaker in a conference in Southern California. And he was like, they had a lot of experts on the stage, and he was the expert of experts. And I forget what the question came up, but somebody in the audience, when it was Q&A time, you know, asked a question to the panel in general. And everybody looked to His Holiness and said, okay, you answer it. Yeah. And His Holiness kind of sat there, and then he said, I don't know. And the room became incredibly silent. You know, here the expert of experts said, I don't know. How is that possible? How many of us would say, I don't know, in front of a crowd of thousands of people? You know, our ego wouldn't let us say, I don't know. Yeah? We would instead change the subject, make the reply in such a way that we are putting down the person who asked the question for asking a stupid question. We would make up some answer that we had no idea if it was true or not. Okay, we would do anything except say, I don't know, in front of a crowd of people, let alone to one person in front of us. Okay, because our pride, our honor is at stake. Yeah, we're very attached to our reputation. And if I say I don't know, it means I don't know, which means I'm stupid. Oh, I'm such a horrible person. I didn't know the answer to this question. You know, I should have been Buddha already, so that I was omniscient and I could give the most erudite reply, but I'm not Buddha yet. What's wrong with me? Okay. We go into that kind of stuff. Yeah? His Holiness said, with perfect self-confidence, I don't know. And he didn't start crying and telling himself that he was worthless. Yeah. He just said, I don't know. And then he turned and he looked at all the other experts and said, what do you people think? Yeah? I mean, how many of us would do that in front of an audience and say, I don't know, and then ask other people who did not have the same high status we do, even though they had some high status, and ask them for their answers? How many of us would do that? Any volunteers? I don't think so. Yeah. But what's interesting about these verses here is, you know, Shantideva is really showing us the karmic effects of our self-centered mind. Yeah, that when we act in a very arrogant way, we will find ourselves the underlings in a future life. Yeah. And similarly, when we oppress people in future lives, we will find ourselves as oppressed. Yeah. So this does not mean that we look at oppressed people and say, you deserve it because in a previous life you oppressed others. Okay, we never use karma to justify social inequality. Okay, karma, yes, why people have low status? Because, so it's interesting. You could think, I better not say this, people will get upset. I'm going to say it anyway. It's karma. I'm just talking about karma as an example. If you were a Nazi in a previous life, then maybe you're born as a Palestinian in this life. Yeah. Or you were a Nazi in previous life. Now in Sudan, there's incredible fighting. Maybe you born in Sudan this lifetime. Yeah. You caused people to flee their home in one lifetime, then you have to flee your home in a future lifetime. Okay? So to see those things, and if we are aware of that, that helps us abandon the negative karma, creating the negative karma. It helps us see how our own self-centeredness is our enemy and brings suffering upon ourselves and others. Okay? We do not use it to point the finger at other people and say, you deserve this. Okay? And people often ask this about karma and say, are you blaming the victim? No, we're not blaming the victim. Yeah? Because if you're coming, if you don't understand that cause and effect are simply cause and effect, that there's no one dishing out rewards and punishments, that things just happen because the causal energy was created. Yeah? If we understand like that, then yeah, we can learn from how cause and effect works. If we have a mind of reward and punishment, then when somebody suffers, we say they're being punished, they deserve it. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, you just got your tooth pulled out and your eye poked out. You deserve it. That is so lacking in compassion, isn't it? That we do not use that kind of thing. Yeah. And as a tip to tell you, because I made a big mistake, is when, because sometime you may be invited to give a talk to a group of people who are oppressed or were oppressed, or their friends just had a very bad accident, and those people ask you a question about karma. Okay? But these are people who are not Buddhist. So I really recommend that's not the time to introduce them to the idea of karma, because they're hurting inside. And because they're hurting inside, they will take what you say about karma as saying the victim deserved it, which is not what you're saying, but that's how they do it. Okay, so true confessions. I'm going to tell you 2 times when I made this mistake. It took me, 1 time wasn't enough. Okay, I'll tell you the second time first. The second time was, you remember many years ago after the plane was shot down over Lockerbie, Scotland? Yeah, and there were a bunch of students from, I think, the University of Syracuse, some university in New York, who were killed on that plane. Yeah, and it was a terrorist attack from, I believe, Libya. Arranged for. I don't know how they did it, but they were behind shooting that plane over, and all these students and other people were killed. So I was had been scheduled to give a talk at that university. Yeah, so I was giving a talk, and the question of karma came up, and somebody said, well, what about what just happened when all the students from our university were killed in this terrorist attack, which crashed the plane? And then I started explaining karma. Oh, if you have an untimely death in this life, it means in a previous life you killed somebody or you cut somebody else's life short. That was the wrong thing to say, because they're grieving the loss of their friends and people from their school, and they heard that as these people, were horrible people because in a previous life they did that. So now they're getting punished by dying in this plane crash, and they deserved it. That's how they heard it. That wasn't how I meant it. But, when you don't think of the audience you're speaking to, and you just say something, it's like open mouth, insert foot, and hurt a lot of people. Okay, so you don't do that. Okay, I'm telling you. The other time I did it was even worse, which is why I told you the second incident first. The first time I did it, I had been, and I should have known better. Yeah, but I thought I was just explaining Buddhism. I was asked to speak to a Jewish group. Yeah, so then somebody raises their hand and says, well, what about the Holocaust? How do you explain that? Because this is one of the big things for the people who suffered in the Holocaust, is God's supposed to be good and you're the chosen people, and there you are getting exterminated, So explain this. We can't make sense of it with God, but God's mysterious, so that's okay. That doesn't bother us too much. But with Buddhism, how would you explain it? And so I started saying, when you're the oppressor, then it creates the karma very easily to become the oppressed in the next life. Oh, God. That was the wrong thing, and I know that culture. I know, God, how did I say that? Well, they totally blew up, totally blew up. So, what I realized, there are times to teach people karma, and there are times not to teach people about karma, and when they're hurting, that's not the time. Yeah, because they misinterpret it. Yeah? How would I explain the Holocaust? Just like that, if in previous lives. Oh, okay. What do you mean, the two versions?
The Buddhist version and the Jewish version.
Okay.
The Jubu version and the Buddhist version.
Okay. The Jewish version would be God had some meaning behind this, and we don't understand it, but we trust that God did this for a purpose. It goes back to the chapter about Jove in the Bible, which I never read, but apparently Jove was afflicted by very serious illness, and the chapter is all about him questioning God and almost losing faith in God, but at the end he, I think, kept his faith, something like that. So, you don't, and Elie Wiesel, I thought somebody here was reading one of Elie Wiesel's book, yeah? So did that question come? Was he asking that question in his writings?
He was losing faith in God because his experience was so terrible during the Holocaust. And he said he met other people in the Holocaust who were also seriously questioning their faith in God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this was, for the people who were very religious, it wasn't just the physical pain, it was the spiritual pain, because they couldn't make any sense of it. Hold on, let me finish for her. From the Buddhist version, you would look at it and say, people who are being oppressed now in a previous life, probably as a group somehow, were oppressed. Okay. If you're talking about Jews suffering now, and that means they were oppressors in the past, people flip out. If you talk about Nazis who harm people now in a future life being born as the oppressed people, then people can accept that better. It's very interesting. Yeah. But from a Buddhist viewpoint, we want to have compassion for the victim and for the perpetrator. Yeah, both sides of it. Because, it's so easy to hate the perpetrator. That's what we naturally do. But when you think that the perpetrator is creating so much negative karma that's going to result in incredible pain, how can you hate that person? Yeah, because you understand karma even though they don't. And if they don't purify, this is what the result will be. Okay? So we use it to inspire ourselves to do more purification, to make very strong determinations never to act in that way and inflict harm on others, and then have compassion for the people who did that, at the same time speaking out and saying those actions are harmful and damaging, and we've got to stop that. You don't just say, oh, well, the Nazis created negative karma themselves. They're sending themselves to hell. We don't need to get involved in it. No. When there's, oppression like that, we need to say something. Yeah.
In the event of the students at the University of Syracuse asking that question, or in the beginning of our UU classes, I had a couple come up to me one day before the class and say that their son had just been killed in a car accident. And what's the Buddhist worldview? And I think I went where you went, and we never saw him again. Something about untimely death, and that something had happened. They had been coming to the class, they had some sense, but in those situations, like you said, they don't want the answer, but what kind of comfort do you give when that's the question?
You say, this is where, Marshall Rosenberg and, these kinds of things come in. You say, wow, it must be a lot of suffering for you. It must be very confusing and painful, and I'm sure you really miss your son greatly, and you want to do something that benefits him as he's going forward into his next life. And then you give them, like the four immeasurables is something that I give to people who are not Buddhist, and I'll say, recite this 10 times in the morning and 10 times in the evening and think about what it says. Yeah, and that works very well because you've given them something positive to think about. And, when people ask questions, you have to listen and figure out what is the actual question they're asking. Because when people say, how would you explain, the death of my child in a car accident or in a school shooting or something, that's not the time to explain karma. That person isn't asking. They may say, what's a Buddhist view? Yeah, but they don't really want to know that. What they're really saying is, I'm hurting. Yeah, will you say something that can help me heal and if you can, point me in a good direction? So you answer that question, not the literal question that they're asking. Yeah. And this comes up many, many times, to really listen and, what are people really asking for? And sometimes they're asking just that somebody listens to them and says, yeah, I can understand what's happening to you. I can understand why you feel that way. And that's often, they may have a very complex question, but that's actually what they're asking. Yeah.
Even among Buddhists, a couple of years ago, I was talking with a friend who is Buddhist, and he had been practicing for many years. And we were speaking, and I just said really casually, like, yeah, we are experiencing the results of our karma. And he got so upset because he went through a lot in his life, and he still had a lot of pain and suffering, and I didn't detect that. So even among Buddhists, I was not skillful enough to, catch that. But he got really, really mad at me when I said that.
Yeah. Yeah, just because somebody's Buddhist and knows the words doesn't mean the idea's in here. Yeah. Unfortunately. Wouldn't it be nice if we knew the words and that meant we had realization? Yeah.
Well, how did you manage the blow up? How did you manage the reaction in the moment when you're giving the talk to the Jewish people? What did you do?
I realized what did I do? I can't even remember. I tried to backtrack and say, and say, no, karma isn't talking about being blamed. It isn't, God, we're not saying that God is inflicting harm because the Jews did something wrong. But I didn't go into this whole thing of because we don't believe in God. Yeah, I didn't say that. But I just, said, no, we're not saying people deserved harm, and then I probably said something about Job and, because that's in the tradition, just questioning why things happen and we don't really know, and it's not blaming anybody. Stupid. Yeah.
When I was in Varanasi, I heard a story about one of the teachers, monk teachers, who have been chased away from a community of untouchables. Buddhists who have turned into Buddhism, but primarily because they were castaways from the Hindu caste. They were of lower caste.
Yeah.
The audience was of lower caste, but have converted to Buddhism. And they have invited a Tibetan Buddhist monk teacher from Varanasi Institute and had him speak. And somehow he touched on karma, and they had heard too much about it being used against them by their Hindu brothers and sisters, and they were not ready to hear it. And I heard that he was literally chased away.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
And just note about how we are limited in how much we can actually benefit, except for our motivation, and to be able to do a better job. How Buddhahood is the answer is also one way to think about this. And the other thing is in the karma system. In the common community, people kind of explain it or understand it as though like your karma is making others do the things to you, which is not that I come across, and so that way we would have some place to put the accountability in the perpetrator.
Yeah.
Yes, and at the same time, our interpretation of the situation in the karmic sense, and thus let ourselves be indifferent or even be kind of saying you got it, you deserve it, like that, it's that it is a case of yourself again creating a negative karma.
Yep.
So those aspects need to be really brought up and
Very
seen.
clear. Yeah. Yeah. Because people so easily forget that, the whole thing about compassion. Yeah. And when that thing comes up, I often give the example of, if you were in a car accident, you were a pedestrian and hit by a car, and you're lying in the middle of the street bleeding, and somebody walks by and goes, "Too bad, that's your karma," and then keeps going. Is that how somebody should respond? Yeah, no.
Doesn't know karma.
Yeah,
Except
exactly.
Except implying, applying it to others, but not to himself or herself.
Yeah, and doesn't realize how much negative karma they're creating by
Yes.
saying such a thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
The first time I went to Airway Heights, I met a man who, and I don't remember what he was saying. Maybe he said something about he had created bad karma to be in prison or something. And I said, you created virtuous karma to have a precious human life. And he reached out, touched me, and said, "Thank you." And every time I was there, I think I reminded the people that, we have a precious human life because we've created the karma for it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's something very uplifting for the people who are incarcerated, And then they realize the preciousness of the Dharma because it's meeting the Dharma that made their human life a precious one. Yeah. And they appreciate that.
any kind of hardships we're going through that might be ripening of our karma, we can still remember that even someone that doesn't have a precious human life, being born as a human is a sign that you've created virtue in the past.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So it's interesting when you're trying to guide people, you have to see what it is that they need at that moment. And you don't lie, but there's so many different ways to approach a situation that we have to sense out what is the best one for this person in this moment. And sometimes we get it, and sometimes we blow it. But we learn. Yeah. But the teaching about karma, when we experience pain, okay, I personally find it very helpful. It stops my complaining. It's like, why am I hurting? I created the cause. Yeah, so why am I blaming anybody else? And this is, my big, I don't want to say, understanding of karma came when I got hepatitis in Nepal, and I was, this was what year, 1976, and when you have hep, you can't move, and I was really miserable. I won't give you the long story, but at some point somebody came in with this little book published by the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives about the Wheel of Sharp Weapons with Geshe Wantarge's commentary on it. So I could barely lift the book up, but I started reading it. And then I got to, I forget what number verse, 9, 10, 11, somewhere around there. And it says, when our body is aching with pain and like this, then this is the wheel of, karma returning, upon us for actions we have done. And then it talks about, well, why? What kind of actions did we do? Harming other sentient beings physically. And I have harmed other sentient beings physically. When I was a kid, I used to gather up all the snails in the garden and step on them, squash them, because I thought I was helping my parents have a beautiful garden, and killing snails was no problem. But, so definitely I harmed other little beings, swatting flies. I used to, compete with my brother of how many flies we could swat. So, okay, I don't know if my hepatitis is a result of those actions. It was probably a result of something I did in a previous life. But I could see how I would hurt other beings physically because I've also done it in this life. So, I'm sick with hep as a result. That made sense. So it stopped me from complaining, oh, the people in the kitchen, they just have little boys helping the cook, and the little boys don't wash the fruit very well. It's all their fault that I got sick. No, there was none of that. Okay. It was like, I created the cause, so don't complain. Yeah. So, when it talks, when you use that for dealing with your own afflictions, it's very, very effective. Why are people not respecting me? Well, how do I relate to other people? Do I respect them? Yeah, in this life, automatically we can see times we haven't respected others. And even though this karma may, and probably has been something in a previous life, who knows what in the world we did in a previous life if, it's bringing a very severe result in this life. So you have to, if the person that you're speaking to is Buddhist, yeah, and they've heard teachings about karma, and that they have some understanding about it, then you can gently say, we create the causes for what we experience. Yeah. So if you inflict pain, you experience pain. Yeah. It doesn't mean that what we did in the past was the exact action, that we're suffering from this life. But it's the whole idea when you inflict pain, that's how the karma ripens in experiencing pain. So, we can remind a friend about that, but make sure it's not his friend who got angry. So you kind of have to sound somebody out and see how they're doing, because it's so interesting when there's times of suffering. Very easily, our mind goes back to what we were brought up with. Yeah, because we haven't completely uprooted the things we learned as kids about, if you're a sinner, then God's going to punish you. And so then we blame ourselves and get depressed, even though we're Buddhist. But when we suffer pain, if we haven't really spent a good amount of time reflecting on karma, then we easily go back to what we were told when we were kids. Yeah, which we certainly don't want to do. Okay, so 129. Whatever joy there is in this world, all comes from desiring others to be happy. And whatever suffering there is in this world, all comes from desiring myself to be happy. Okay, another verse that can be misinterpreted. Okay, but the first two lines, whatever joy there is in the world, all comes from desiring others to be happy, that makes some sense. But, we also have to understand what make others happy means. Does it mean we give everybody what they want? Does it mean we do whatever other people want us to do? When it talks about making others happy, is that the meaning? That other people have ideas about what we should do and think and so on, and to make them happy, we do those things? No. It doesn't mean that, because they may be seeing things from their worldview. For example, if you're dealing with your parents when you want to ordain, they don't think of multiple lives, at least most of our parents. I don't know, anybody's parents here think about multiple lives? Oh, yeah, good. Well, you grew up in Buddhist cultures, even though your family might not have been staunchly Buddhist, that idea was there. But if you grew up in a culture where, your family didn't have that idea, then, and you want to ordain and you try and say, I want to create good karma for future lives, and I want to improve the quality of my mind so in future lives I can benefit you in a way of leading you out of samsara to nirvana. Your mom and dad are going to look at you like you're out of your mind, because that's not their worldview. Okay, for them, there is this life, and the purpose of life is to have be well respected, to have money, to be successful in your career and the top of the ladder, and to give them grandchildren. But don't leave the grandchildren with them all the time, because that's a pain in the neck. Just bring the kids over when they want to see them for a short time, and then take them and you can handle them. So, that's their worldview. So talking to them from our worldview is just, and then they get so upset and confused. So we have to explain it in a different way, and that's why the way you explain it is say, you were such good parents and you gave me a really good ethical foundation. You brought me up well, and you taught me not to lie, and you taught me not to steal, and, to respect others. And so what I'm doing and wanting to ordain is just a continuation of all the good values that you instilled in me as as my parents, and I really appreciate what you did as my parents. You say it that way, and then your parents feel, oh, wow, I did a good job after all. Because we don't realize it, but parents often criticize themselves for the way their kids come out. What did I do to deserve a kid like you? Oh, I must have been a really horrible parent. But when you say to your parents, and it's true, that they gave us a good ethical foundation, and we're so glad they did. And what we're doing now, we're not rejecting the family. We're just continuing what our parents taught us. And then they feel good, and they understand what we're doing. At least a little better than if you try to tell them, well, I'm going to liberate you from samsara in the future. And mom and dad look at you and you're going to say, you going to what? That was another one that happened in my family. The cat, they had a little kitten who had fleas. And I was just visiting my folks for a short time, and my mom wanted to wash the cat with some kind of thing that killed the fleas. And I said, don't kill the fleas, And my mother looked at me and she said, you tell us not to kill the fleas, but you're killing us by your decision to do this Buddhist thing. Okay. Okay, let's see, how can I say something in the next time they do that? This kind of thing, maybe you don't say anything, because I used to walk around Green Lake in Seattle. Those of you who knew Green Lake know that people are fishing there. And it would pain me to see the fisher people. They were usually men, fishermen. But I couldn't go up to them and say, don't catch fish. You're creating the karma to, have a short life in your future rebirth. They would have caught me with their, tied their, fish wire around me. So there's times when you just can't say things to people because it's just not in their worldview. So you either have to find a skillful way or, kind of not say anything and make prayers for them, or, changing the subject. In conversations, when you see people starting to argue, if you say, don't argue, then, what are they going to do? Well, why shouldn't I argue? She didn't, but you just change the subject. So you take, I saw this with Lama Yeshe. He was so skillful with this because people in the teachings, in class, Q&A answer, somebody would raise their hand and then start to give a speech about their whole worldview, about, well, Lama, what do you feel about there being alternative universes in which, who we are now is also there living in the future, or another alternative universe where who we were before is also still alive. What do you think about that, Lama? Do Buddhists believe in these kinds of alternative universes and time travel? Yeah. Lama didn't look at these people and go, God. He said, oh, you mean you're talking about having different lives than the life that we have now? Yes, Buddhists believe in that. We talk about rebirth. And then he talked about rebirth. So he just changed he took one word or one idea from what those people were saying, and then he steered the conversation in another direction without having to say, you fool, do you believe in that kind of junk? Yeah. Or shaming the person for asking a stupid question. No, he was very respectful. So, very good example. Mm-hmm. Okay. But how you speak to different people is going to be different. If you're speaking to a Buddhist friend, and that they've studied the Dharma for a while, but right now at this moment, their mind is like out to lunch. With them, you might say, oh, think of it this way. Yeah. Don't say you're wrong. What happened? You don't believe in Buddhism anymore? You're saying that kind of junk? No, you don't say that. You say, yeah. That may be what you want to say, but it doesn't do any good. Yeah. And if our purpose is to benefit others, that doesn't benefit them. So you have to say, I understand you're in pain, but remember how, our teacher taught us, Have you thought of it that way? Or tell them a story of your own experience and how you used a Dharma technique to deal with some kind of problem you had. And that could give them an idea of what to do. You don't look and go, oh, yeah, there's a verse in The Wheel of Sharp Weapons that talks about when you're disparaged and people don't respect you and ignore you and put you down. That's what you're experiencing now. Let me pull out that verse and tell you what you did in your last life. No. Okay. But in verse 129, So when it says all comes from desiring others to be happy, it doesn't mean we give other people what they want all the time, because sometimes what they want harms themselves or harms others. Yeah. So, and there's disagreement about this. I have one Dharma friend who, when it comes up, you're at a gas station and somebody comes by and asks for some money, and you have a sneaking suspicion they're going to use it for drugs or alcohol. I say, sorry. Yeah. And anyway, I don't usually have a lot of money with me, but, it's like, no, I'm sorry, I won't give you anything. My friend, who's also a nun, says, oh, I don't care how they're using it. They ask for it, I'll give them something. But I don't think that's suitable, because if they go and use it for alcohol or drugs or whatever, then it's just continuing the harm in their life and the harmful actions they do that affect others. Okay, so people have different ways of understanding this. But of course, as you all know, my way is the right way. Yeah. No, but think about it. Think about what you want to do. So it doesn't mean, being what other people want you to be, doing what they want you to do. You have to learn to think for yourself. Okay. Now, of course, if your teacher tells you to do something, that's a different case, because they have the same worldview as you do, and they're in the position of guiding you. Yeah. So when His Holiness is giving a teaching, doesn't matter how many thousands of people there, and he says, speak truthfully. You don't say, well, he's speaking to the other thousands of people there, but he's not speaking to me. Yeah. No, you're getting an instruction, and you know yourself that that's the right thing to do, and so you follow through with that. Okay, so that's the first two lines. All comes from desiring others to be happy, which is true, if we really look around and we think, how can I make somebody else's life a little bit more joyful? Yeah, we will see lots of opportunities to do that. Especially, when you go to town, and you're in the hardware store, just chatting with somebody to create a good relationship, to let them know that that they're important. So you talk about the kind of, special kind of nails that you're buying, and ask their opinion and expertise, and then they feel good. Yeah. Or just talking to somebody, and how's your day? And so that kind of thing, there's so many small things that we can do. Many people come here for lunch, and this may be the only time in eons that they have any contact with Buddhists. Yeah. So, we pay attention to them, we talk to them, we show them that Buddhists are kind people, and okay, we shave our heads and, wear funny clothes, but we're kind people, and, we have something to say that might help them. Yeah. But we have to show that kindness first. Yeah. Instead of, well, glad you came here, sit down, and I'm going to give you a book and, tell you all about the disadvantages of self-centeredness. No. Yeah. Okay, then the last two lines of there, and whatever suffering there is in this world, all comes from desiring myself to be happy. So then it's so easy to say, oh, if I want myself to be happy, that's wrong. That's sinful. I hate the word sin. I think that there's a few words I think should be deleted from vocabulary. Sin, blame, fault. Those are three of my favorite ones. I have a few other ones, but those are the ones that, thinking of everything in terms of sin. Sin is heavy, isn't it? Yeah, when I talk to people, how they grew up, sin is very heavy. So this, and whatever suffering there is in the world all comes from desiring myself to be happy. So I should not want myself to be happy. Yeah. And I am sinful, so I should do everything I can to not be happy, so that's my penance. The more I suffer, the more I'm purifying all my sin from the past. No. Okay, that's not the meaning of this. That's how people who have that kind of worldview interpret it. That's not what Shantideva's meaning. Okay, what Shantideva's meaning is when we are sitting there and every single thing we do, we think of ourselves and our own benefit first, yeah, then we're going to wind up doing things that cause pain to others. Yeah? And so just marching through life, thinking, me, I, my, and mine, whatever I want, I'm going to do, and nobody's going to stop me, and the whole world's against me, so I've got to attack them to stick up for myself. He's talking about when we have that kind of attitude and behavior. Okay, so we may not be perfect examples. There's some people that we read about in the newspaper that are pretty excellent examples of that. We may not be that far extreme, but we have elements in our life and we have times in our life where we behave like that. And we should not overlook these things and say, well, I'm not as bad as so-and-so. Well, that's nice we're not as bad as so-and-so. So-and-so is a habitual liar and doesn't even know the difference between truth and false, Well, so I'm not like that person. Is that a reason to be proud? No, I, sometimes am extremely selfish and put people down and don't respect them. So that's what I've got to look at and correct in my own behavior, okay? Because whatever suffering there is in the world all comes from desiring myself to be happy. When I have that attitude of, my happiness before anybody else's. Yeah. And how dare they ask me to work in the forest? How dare they ask me? I have far superior intellectual abilities. So don't tell me to work in the forest. That's maybe why you should work in the forest. Yeah. Okay. So how can I wiggle out of it? Yeah. I don't like working in the forest. Have you ever looked at why you don't like it? Well, I get dirty. Yeah, I get dirty. Yeah, living here, you're going to get dirty anyway. Aren't you? I mean, how we live out in nature, our clothes are usually dirty, aren't they? Even you just walk from here to there. Yeah. One of our friends is telling me my time's up. Bow wow. Oh, there's a question. Okay, let's do the question. What's that one's? That one's Marvelous Moi? Or Beautiful Beagle? Yeah, two names. A lay name and a Dharma name.
Okay. The question is copying Dharma translations that have a copyright on them negative karma?
It depends on how much you're copying, whether you've asked permission and received permission, okay? If it's one verse and you're quoting a few verses in a book or in an article you're writing, then the custom is you just give the reference where other people can find that verse, that you're doing. If we just had this recently, the people from Nalanda wanted to copy some 2 chapters from Following in the Buddhist Footsteps about ethical conduct, because they're a monastery and they found those chapters helpful, and they said not everybody could afford the book, so can we copy those 2 chapters out? So I wrote to the publisher, to Wisdom Publications, and told them the situation and asked them, and they said yes. Yeah, I personally, even though I'm the author, I don't have the power to say yes. 2 chapters is too much. If they wanted to copy 5 pages, that I could say, because lots of times professors will say, can we photocopy 5 pages? That kind of thing I can say, but 2 chapters, that's a lot, So you refer to the publisher and ask them. Yeah. But I've seen some of the things that I've written in Singapore being republished in Taiwan with people who didn't ask permission. Yeah. Of course, I would have given permission, and I was totally happy to see that the books were published. But, the polite thing to do is to ask. And if somebody says no, then, you go by that.